You've come to the right spot. It's another edition of Lewis at Large. 60 minutes of smart talk radio is in your future, with guests from all walks of life and all points of view. And now, with this week's edition of Lewis at Large, here's your host, Warner Lewis.
Well, welcome everybody to another segment of Lewis at Large. Yours truly, Warner Lewis, from the flight deck of Lewis at Large, and that means, of course, smart talk radio is in your future. Today, in this segment, an interesting take indeed. We're going to be talking a very, very interesting work called The Quran, With or Against the Bible. Ejaz Naqvi, he's a doctor. He is also a born-again Muslim. He is the president of a local Islamic center, actively involved in many other local Islamic centers across the country. He serves on the executive board of the Interfaith Council of Contra Costa County, California. He also serves on the board of directors of the Islamic Scholarship Fund. It will be an interesting conversation indeed, and we're more than happy to have him here. Ejaz, how are you, my friend?
Good morning. Thanks for having me on. I'm doing okay.
Indeed. Let's do this. Let's start with the basics. The Quran, with or against the Bible, addresses really the key themes of that work and answers commonly asked questions in search of finding common ground. Tell us what is your motivation for writing it, and tell us in general what you found.
So the inspiration behind writing this book was never more apparent than what happened in Boston just 3 weeks ago. There are a lot of myths and misconceptions about the Quran as well as the Bible. And when I started to study the Quran some 20 years ago or so, it opened my eyes and my heart. And it also made me study the Bible. So as I started to read the Bible, I started to realize there were a lot of similarities in the essential teachings of the Quran and the Bible. And so I always thought I would write a book on the Quran as well as the Bible. And the recent events in the last 3 to 4 years or so basically confirmed to me that if this is not the right time, then I don't know what will be. So that was the inspiration to remove a lot of the myths and misconceptions about the Quran, as well as to highlight the similarities that two scriptures share, which most people I don't think realize.
I'm curious. Again, this is all coincidental. This show actually airs on a Sunday morning, and so while this is not a religious show, there are times, if we're not talking about politics or showbiz, we'll be talking about sometimes religion. I'm curious as to, as we dive in here, from what you see and your opinion, and this may sound like sort of a heady question, but in your opinion, does God accept or prefer one form of worship over the other?
And that is a very valid and very good question. So I think I don't want to get too deep, but we have to realize if you're born in a Muslim family, for example, and that's by chance, obviously, then if you're born in a Jewish family or a Christian family, Hindu or Sikh family, then you become whatever your parents' religion is, most of the time at least. So and whose decision is it? It's not my decision to be born in a Muslim family. So does God wanted us to be Jews and Christians and Muslims and Hindus and Sikhs? And there are some verses in the Quran that actually reflect that. And it says if God had wanted, he would have made you into one nation. But you were made into different tribes and nations so you may know each other. And so that struck me. So you may know each other. It's not that we can actually despise each other or show each other how superior we are to the other. And that is the take-home message there, is that we are different so we could appreciate our diversity. And there are many verses, just to go back to your question. There are clear verses in chapter 2 and chapter 5. They're very similar, but the gist of it is that you have attained to faith, and that's a reference to the Muslims. And those who are Christians and Sabians and Jewish, anyone who believes in one God and the last day and does righteous deed shall have no fear, nor shall they grieve on the day of judgment, and their reward will be from their Lord. Very clear, and then that's chapter 5, verse number 69, and chapter 2, verse number 62. Very similar verses. So that, to me, is very black and white. That the criteria are laid out as to who is righteous and then who will have their reward from their Lord. It could have easily said you have to be quote unquote a Muslim, and then you'll have your reward. But the verses are clearly not saying that.
Right. What about the Quranic view of Christian prophets Moses and Jesus?
Islam, this is where
I said
talk
Christian
about
prophets. I really meant prophets in general, but yeah.
Right. So this is what I talk about, the myths and misconceptions. If you ask anyone, that it actually includes Muslims who brought Islam, quote unquote. They will say Muhammad brought Islam. The fact is that Muhammad did not bring Islam. He merely completed it, because the Quranic view of Islam is that it's one religion from Adam to Muhammad. Muhammad was the last prophet, and Adam was the first prophet. And from Adam to Noah to Abraham and Isaac and Ishmael and Moses, David, Jesus Christ, they were all prophets of God, same God, the Creator. And they brought the same essential message. And the essential message was to bring people closer to God and to tell them what's right and what is wrong. That's I know it's probably an oversimplification, but that is the essential message of the scriptures.
Do you expect, and again, if you have just joined us, got an interesting conversation going on here. We're talking to Ejaz Naqvi. He is currently the president of the local Islamic Center. He's also very actively involved in Islamic centers across the country. He is on the executive board of the Interfaith Council of Contra Costa County, California, and he also serves on the board of directors of Islamic Scholarship Fund. The work we are talking about today is called The Quran With or Against the Bible. It is of extreme interest to him and probably many people, and I'm very curious, what kind of feedback are you getting from Christians? What kind of feedback are you getting from the Islamic community?
The feedback generally has been extremely positive. I think the word that's most often said is much needed. Because the existing literature, as well as what you see on mainstream, is very divisive. And the comparative religion usually glorifies one religion or one scripture, and it just puts down the other religion, be it from Muslims. Muslims will glorify the Quran and then look down upon Christianity, Judaism, or the Bible. And then the biblical writers, or the writers on Bible, will glorify the Bible and Jesus Christ, but then they will, at times, frankly speaking, demonize Muhammad and the Quran. And we have seen perfect examples with Terry Jones burning the Quran, Pamela Gaylor, she uses the Quran as a doorstep, and so on. And Pat Robertson basically saying Islam simply means if you're following Islam, there is no difference between religious people, terrorist people. They're all just evil. So when you see that, you know that just simply cannot be true. And so that was my inspiration, was to put a comparative study out there without giving my own opinion. So in my book, The Quran With or Against the Bible, the emphasis is on the actual passages from the Bible and the Quran. And I kind of limit my own commentary because I don't want to give my opinion. I want to put all the data, if you will, out there for the readers to decide and for themselves rather than relying on somebody else.
What about the challenges and the how shall we say, the juxtaposition of the Bible and what would be considered modern science is well documented, at times in conflict and times in concert. I'm curious as to how you see the Quran. How does it view science, and where do you see its place?
The Quranic verses, there are many Muslims who think the Quran is a literal word, and then they give some of the verses on astronomy, for example, or embryology, and I have an entire section titled "The Quran and the Science" in the book. reserved for that. And there are verses, by the way, the Quran and the Bible, they are not instruction manuals and they're not science books. So if you're looking to find the Big Bang in the Quran and the Bible, you will not see it. But there are many references to it. So, for example, in the Quran, there is a passage that says the earth and the heavens were joined and then we split them asunder. Now, one can easily say that this was a reference to the Big Bang without calling it a Big Bang, or verses that say that the earth and the moon and the sun and the stars, they all move in one circle on the order of your Lord. So, you know, the orbits, they were not very clearly known 1,400 years ago. And in those days, you know, we were living in a geocentric world. Where everything revolves around the earth, and that's not what the Quran said. And then it talks about has some indirect references to ozone layer, for example, or how the mountains you think they are stationary, but they're not stationary, and that they're moving. And then if you look at some of the geological surveys and how they are pegs used as a peg to stabilize Earth, and there are references to that in the Quran. And then there's embryological verses on embryology and how there are 3 layers in darkness and so on and so forth. And this is some 1,400 years ago. And then just the mere fact, and when it talks about the end times, that the stars will crumble. And right now we now know that Earth and the Sun has a finite life. It's only a matter of when rather than if. That was not very well known 1,400 years ago. And the Quran and the Bible clearly talk about the end times where the Earth and then the Sun will disappear. And so you have to then assume that it came from a source that was, whatever you want to call it, supernatural or out of this world.
Kind of a follow-up here. You are a practicing physician, and I'm curious as to the kinds of challenges, conflicts, or maybe small crisis of faith you have in what you do, so to speak, in your real life versus your spiritual life.
I can very honestly say that the study of the Quran and then the Bible has made me a better person in general, better physician, better perspective. I would say, without hurting anybody else's feelings, that the best profession out there is healing other people. So I work in physical part of healing, and part of it is also mental part of healing. I'm in chronic pain. And, we look at both the mind and the body because we simply cannot afford to separate the mind and the body. And that peace of mind. So this is what I know religion has been used to divide people and then create hate, and it has bad name and so on and so forth. And there are some clearly people of religion to blame in part. But the fact is that the religion brings you closer to God and brings you inner peace. And without that inner peace, all the things that we see is really a reflection of these people not having that inner peace. And being close to God brings you that inner peace that we often lack.
Well, as we begin to wind down here, I would like to, and again, the work that we have been talking about, I think it's very interesting topic. It's a topic-by-topic review for the investigative mind called The Quran with or Against the Bible. And as we start to wind down here, I'm curious as to if there's one thought, one major takeaway, so to speak, from the work. What was the lesson from all the research and the work that you did?
That the Quran and the Bible are more similar than most people realize, and it's very God-centric. They both talk about being close to God and also doing the right deeds and being kind and to your neighbor, kind to everybody else. And what you do to others is equally as important as being close to God. In fact, that the two are inseparable. It's not either or. So I think that was the most striking finding, if you will. The book, by the way, is available on Amazon, and I just got an email last night that it was one of the finalists in the Indie Book Award.
Wonderful. Hey, also a question for you. Do you have a website where if people want to explore this subject a little deeper? Is there someplace they can find more information?
It is. It's my website after my name. It's full name without any spaces. So it's EjazNaqvi.com, and it's spelled EjazNaqvi.com.
Well, I appreciate you sharing. It's a complicated subject, probably at times emotional, but one that we have not talked about directly on this show before, and I deeply appreciate you spending part of your day with us.
It was a pleasure talking to you. Thanks.
You bet. We will be back with more right after this on Lewis at Large.